All right, we got ourselves a Wendigoon video. The unsolved true I can't read. The unsolved true crime iceberg explained. All right, we got what is this? An hour and a half long. Okay, I wonder if he's gonna talk about the what were they called? The five dudes that he made a video about recently. I wonder if that's gonna be mentioned in this video. Anyways, let's take a look.
Everybody, and welcome to the True Crime Unsolved Iceberg. As the title suggests, this is going to be a look at atrocities and crimes committed by people who to this day have not been caught. The chart goes from everything from well-known unsolved cases.
Oh, it's not really true. Well, I guess. Well, okay. The crime part is it's not really a crime. The five dudes that went missing. At least we don't know if it's a crime or not. It could be.
All the way down to discovered victims and remains who are hard to explain, let alone catch who did it. I will not be showing any of the more brutal crime scene imagery, but I will be discussing some more intense topics, especially as the iceberg goes down, so viewer discretion advised. I would also like to thank Reddit user Washer Masu, at least I think that's how it's pronounced, who made this iceberg and was a big help to me in figuring out some of the ones that I didn't even know about and couldn't find information on initially. As he said, the chart is ranked by obscurity and a little bit of depravity. That being said,
Interesting.
timestamps for every
Depravity. Oh
will
boy.
be in
All
the
right.
description. So if you're getting bored or don't like whatever's being mentioned on one tier, skip ahead to the next to see if you like that better. Also, I'm going to link the original iceberg image in the description. I'll have it posted on my Patreon. But you'll notice that I omitted a few of them from this video. The reason being the original iceberg was just unsolved mysteries in general. So a few have to do with the supernatural and things similar, and I'd rather just stick to the true crime aspect, especially since a lot of those supernatural ones I cover in the conspiracy series, or at least I felt like I should remove.
Dude, the conspiracy series. I can't talk today. The conspiracy series, man. That's on my list, but goddamn, I think that video is 9.5 hours long or something. So I'll probably watch it, but I'll just break it into parts. And I think he already has it kind of broken into parts, which is perfect.
By my opinion for this video, because you know the thing about opinions, everyone's got one. And speaking of opinions, how would you like to get paid for yours? I'm going to tell you how with the sponsor of today's video, Opinion Outpost. Now, I'll be completely honest with you guys. Whenever I saw Opinion Outpost email me for a video, I thought it was too good to be true. The site advertises that for free, while not giving any of your sensitive information, you can make money just by answering questions. So I got on the site, tried it out, and it's actually what they said it is. Opinion Outpost works as a hub where companies can use your thoughts as a census group and then pay you for your opinions. So in other words, you can do what I did and make a couple dollars while you're on the couch watching Netflix. By just answering surveys, you will get points that can lead you to rewards like Amazon gift cards or even direct payouts through PayPal. So this sounds like an awesome product. I wanted to bring it to you all if you are interested. So I am happy that they are sponsoring me, because using the link in the description, you can go directly to Opinion Outpost and start earning money for your own thoughts. Because hey, everybody's got an opinion, but not everyone's got cash. Thank you so much to everyone for watching. A massive thank you to Opinion Outpost for sponsoring this video. It really does mean a lot, especially from a small creator like myself. Check out Opinion Outpost, and we are back to the video. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this. I have come down with a horrible cold of some kind and am on an absurd amount of Alka-Seltzer and NyQuil currently, so this is going to be fun. We're kicking it off with tier 1, but as always,
Zodiac Killer.
Thank you for watching. Jack the Ripper is confirmed to have 5 victims, although some believe he may have had more. He mostly preyed on people in the impoverished Whitechapel district of London in 1888. While no one knows exactly who Jack the Ripper was,
did he only
there
kill
were
women
several
or something?
letters sent from him to the police, sort of teasing his arrest. All of the victims were prostitutes, which have led some to theorize that possibly it was a morality or for God killing, while others have argued a misogyny-based motive. However, my personal theory is that speculation of police officers at the time believed the women that were killed had previously worked for high-ranking government officials. Meaning Jack the Ripper, or either a group of people calling themselves Jack the Ripper, could have been acting as a sort of red right hand of these government officials. This is supported by some things, such as 3 of the victims having their organs removed, which some believe mean he was taking the organs for himself, or others believe that possibly these women were pregnant and this was a means of preventing an unwanted child from government official. And
What the
considering
fuck?
that he knew the police routes and knew exactly how to obscure
whoa.
evidence in a way the police cannot trace him, I, as well as many others, believe that maybe Jack the Ripper was a cop. The Zodiac Killer was a serial killer who attacked Northern California from the late 60s to early 70s. Having 5 known victims with the attempt of more, the Zodiac Killer attacked couples who seemed to be on dates or sort of lovers' lane locations. He was famous, and the name came from cryptograms he would send the local press as a means of taunting them to his whereabouts, even claiming that in one of the ciphers was his real name.
Wasn't it pretty? Wasn't it like a pretty basic code to crack? I don't remember. I watched the Zodiac movie. I think it's on like Netflix or something right now. And if that movie's accurate, I think I remember them saying that like the Zodiac Killer thought themselves to be like super smart, but like
has never been solved.
Not that really.
People were so desperate to figure out who the Zodiac Killer was that they began saying that maybe it's Ted Kaczynski and just pinning it on other popular crimes of the time. Although Robert Graysmith's book led many to believe it was a man by the name of Arthur Lee Allen.
I think that's
Considering
what
he
the
one of
movie was based
initial
off of.
People interviewed as a possible suspect, although the police couldn't pin him for anything. And while a lot of the evidence proved to be circumstantial, the fact that the killing stopped immediately after Arthur Lee Allen died, along with a few other things, leads several to believe that perhaps he was the Zodiac Killer. The murder of the Grimes sisters.
I think the movie, it like heavily implied at the end that he was the killer.
Was a double murder that took place in Chicago on the night of December 28th, 1956. Barbara and Patricia Grimes were on their way back from the local movie theater when they went missing. Being only 15 and 12 years old, it sparked the largest search in Cook County history. During this time, 300,000 people were questioned by the Chicago police and 2,000 were interrogated. There were also several weird sightings people reported, such as seeing them get on and off a bus in a town several miles away, or seeing them eating at the local diner as if nothing was wrong. However, when you ask around 300,000 people, there's probably going to be some missed sightings. Sadly, on January 22nd, their bodies were found by a road just outside of Chicago, where the coroner report later said that they had been dead roughly a month. No one was ever officially caught or tried for the murder of these girls, and it remains to many as one of the more odd cases, considering the number of people that were looking for them, and several cite it as the day Chicago lost its innocence. I had no idea about this before doing research for this video, but there is a very popular theory that James Earl Ray did not kill Martin Luther King Jr. So much so that the King family filed a civil suit against the state, saying that they had the wrong man. Up to the point that Martin's son, Dexter King, was visiting James Earl Ray nearly weekly in prison, talking to him about how they need to get him out. It got to such a point that they put together a committee, also known as the House Select Committee on Assassinations, to determine if MLK was killed by James Earl Ray, which also on that committee they ruled the JFK shooting, and you know how I feel about that one. It'd be no secret that the government hated Martin Luther King, doing everything from denying his concealed carry permit to writing him letters in an attempt to make him kill himself.
Jesus Christ, I didn't know about that.
James Earl Ray was just part of a greater conspiracy, and I went down such a rabbit hole with this there will probably be a deeper dive, so stay tuned. Bob Crane was a famous actor from the show Hogan's Heroes. However, unlike the wholesome television show he was on, when he was not on set, he was doing a whole lot of... As a matter of fact, he greatly enjoyed filming these events, sometimes without the consent of the women themselves.
Oh, Jesus.
With the help of his partner, John Henry Carpenter. That was until June 29th of 1978 when Victoria Berry, his co-star, came to see him as he had not come to work that day, only to find him bludgeoned to death on the ground with a phone cord wrapped around his neck.
Holy shit.
Immediately, attention turned towards John Henry Carpenter. According to Bob's son, the night before his dad was murdered, John was in a fight with Bob over the phone, as Bob had said that John had gotten weird and a little too clingy, and he was trying to break off their friendship. This led to an investigation of John where nothing conclusive was turned up, although a lot of people to this day thinks he probably did it. Because, they impounded his car, and they found blood and supposedly brain matter in the back seat.
God damn.
They couldn't test the DNA. Okay, sure. So it wasn't conclusive.
Brain matter. Can't test it, but...
I mean, if you found the brain matter.
Yeah, what the fuck?
His best friend's dead the next day. Probably.
Yeah.
This one,
this one's pretty.
It's technically unsolved, but is it really unsolved? Come on, guys, really? What is known for sure is that Nicole Simpson and Ron Goldman were murdered on June the 12th of 1994. Attention immediately turned towards Nicole's husband, O.J. Simpson, who was a popular football player who was fleeing the scene at the time this was going down. This led to the famous chase down the LA freeway in his white Ford Bronco. This then led to an 11-month trial, which many have called the trial of the century for its widespread publication. Despite evidence so far
11 months,
as O.J.
Jesus.
Simpson's DNA being on the inside of a glove left at the crime scene that had Nicole Simpson's blood on the outside of it, O.J.'s lawyer managed to make it a race issue.
It's so crazy that he was able to get away with it. Yeah. His lawyers did such a good
saying
job.
that the LA police were staging OJ to take the fall for someone else's crime, which led to a not guilty verdict for OJ, and no other suspects have been named since because, yeah. Tupac, who was a famous rapper and actor, was murdered on September.
There's a lot
7th,
of theories about this.
1996 in Las Vegas. At 11:15, his car was stopped at a stoplight, to which a four-door Suburban pulled up next to them, to which the driver then rolled down the window and shot into Tupac's car. Tupac survived for 6 days in the hospital before passing away. The only real single suspect that's been named in the case is a man named Orlando Anderson, who was a Crip that Tupac had gotten into with a fight earlier that night because Orlando had supposedly stolen jewelry from one of Tupac's groupies at an earlier date. However, no conclusive evidence stuck, and Tupac's death is remembered to this day as one of the most tragic of the music industry. Closely related is the death of the notorious
Biggie.
B.I.G. The rapper, also known as Biggie, was killed on March the 9th of 1997 in L.A. In a very
Wait, how far apart were their deaths?
since because
I'm curious about that.
1996 in Las Vegas.
About a year apart.
97 in LA. In a very similar circumstance, at nearly 1 in the morning, while sitting in his car, a Chevy Impala drove up next to BIG's vehicle and fired out the window into his. Biggie was hit 4 times and died that night of his injuries in a hospital, with his death occurring only 6 months after Tupac's.
Oh, it was 6
many
months,
relate
wow.
this to being part of a larger world of a rapper turf war. Now,
That's
Elisa
crazy.
Lam's pretty popular now, thanks in no small part to the Netflix documentary.
Oh, is this the hotel shit where like the mysterious floor or something, and she gets off and just like disappears and no one has like any idea where she went?
Which showcase the most probable reason for her disappearance. However, for those of you who don't know,
So
on February
weird.
19th of 2013, Elisa Lam was seen on the security camera of the Cecil Hotel, freaking out at seemingly nothing.
Yeah, that
on
was
the security
weird.
tapes, you can see her peeking in and out of an elevator, seeming freaked out as if someone's following her, before she runs off and isn't seen alive ever again.
Dude, I'm not really like a big supernatural guy. Like I don't really believe in it that much, but like this looked very like there's supernatural shit involved.
3 days later,
was
she was
weird.
found in the water tank on the roof of the hotel. While now the common theory is that she was off of her medication and was suffering a sort of delusional mental episode, it doesn't explain all the pieces like how she got to the roof, how she got inside of the water tower, and if anyone else was involved. The Travolta Pass incident occurred in 1959 when in the month of February 9 bodies were found in Russia. What had happened was this group of researchers had gone out in order to do forward observations of this sort of tundra area within Russia. After not reporting back for 2 weeks, a rescue crew went out to locate them, which when they found them, all 9 of them were in very different states of bodily disarray. They suffered everything from extreme chest trauma, like every single rib being broken,
Jesus.
skull damage, having their eyes and tongues removed, as well as
Whoa.
being punctured into a tree. This has
Holy
led to
shit.
a near infinite amount of theories, which has been covered with people much more
Bigfoot.
qualified than I am. With the modern theory being
Bigfoot.
that maybe a giant avalanche came in and threw them all into these different forms of injury
Nah.
that ended up killing them.
It was
To
the
which
Yeti.
the things like the tongues and eye being removed are the effects of wildlife in the area. Either way, their
Sure.
official cause of death to this day is written down as an overwhelming, compelling force, which could mean literally anything.
Yeah,
Which,
sure.
I mean, we all know it was giants. Like, they got too close to the gateway to the Middle Earth. So
To
the giants had to come
Jormungandr.
up and, you know, teach him a lesson. The Black Dahlia murder case refers to Elizabeth Short, who was found murdered on January the 15th of 1947. Elizabeth Short had gone to LA in order to star in movies, however tragically that never came to fruition as she was found dead. The coroner report places her time of death as 5 days earlier than when she was discovered, in the middle of a empty lot in downtown LA. What's especially interesting about this case is the way that the press handled it. Like, I understand it was 1947, but oh my word. Like, for example, whenever they found her body, she was naked and she was purposefully posed in a depraving manner. The
What?
press jumped on this opportunity, saying that she was a prostitute and
Oh,
a
okay,
call girl,
dude.
and making it
Of
like
course.
a very naughty case. Like, to give you an idea,
She was
whenever they
asking
got the
for
name
it.
Elizabeth Short, they called her mom, who was in New York, and told her that her daughter had won a beauty contest and that they needed to take some information. So after recording all the information, they asked the mom. They then go, "Actually, this is the newspaper. Your daughter's dead."
Oh my god.
Click.
That's
Like,
fucked.
oh my gosh. I know, like, no one cared about that kind of thing in 1947, but was everyone a monster?
That's
Even
fucked.
the name Black Dahlia comes from an old Hollywood movie known as Blue Dahlia, further adding to the whole mysticism of this sexy murder victim. All in all, during the case, 500 people confessed to the murder as a means of getting popular. It even got to the point that it became a sort of dare among young guys to go confess to the police that you murdered the Black Dahlia.
What
With
the fuck?
one
What
officer
kinda-
who worked the
what
case
kinda dare?
remarking the unbelievable amount of people who went to the police confessing that
Oh
it
my
was
God,
their
people were so
in-laws
bored
who
back in the
murdered
day.
her. Sadly, the true murderer has never been found, but at least in recent years, Elizabeth has been given some of the respect that she deserved back. We are now on to Tier 2. Art heist at the Garter Museum occurred on March the 18th of 1990. In it, at this Boston museum, nearly $500 million worth of artwork was stolen in one night.
Wow.
What happened is during the night shift, two of the security guards let in two men who were dressed as police who said they were responding to a disturbance. These two men dressed as police then overwhelmed the guards and tied them up in the basement while they went around stealing artwork off the walls. They were in and out in 81 minutes and took 13 pieces of art from behind displays. Also, before they left, they went to the guards that they had tied up in the basement, asked if they were comfortable and they needed to get them anything before they went. The leading theory
That's
is
funny.
that the men were part of the Boston Mafia, and that's part of the reason they were so well connected.
Was any of the
as
art
having never
found
been
again?
Found afterwards, despite their
Wait, what?
sketches appearing
Oh, it
all
wasn't?
over Boston. The leading theory is that the men were part of the Boston Mafia, and that's part of the reason they were so well connected as having never been found afterwards.
Oh, the
despite
men
their
were.
sketches appearing all over Boston shortly afterwards. And other than a letter that came in a few months later saying they wanted to delegate a return of the art with the museum, to which the author of the letter never responded again, no other leads have been made in the case. John Benet Ramsey was a 6-year-old beauty pageant star who was murdered Christmas morning of 1996.
God, dude.
The short version is John Benet's parents woke up on Christmas morning, not able to find their daughter, with a ransom note located on the kitchen counter. They then
Oh,
called the
that's so
police,
sad,
who
dude.
came over and began setting up the proper way to go up.
It's like true crime fascinates me. Like I love watching true crime, but whenever it's like a child that's involved, it just it just fucking depresses me, dude. It's like I don't want to watch it anymore.
About paying the ransom money. However, the other party never showed up to take the ransom that day, and 7 hours after the initial police call and ransom note was found, one of the officers discovered John Benet's body in the basement. She had been strangled and hidden down there as a means for the
Jesus
family
Christ.
to not find her. That's when a lot of the details start to get kind of weird. For example, the ransom note that was found was nearly 2.5 pages long, and the materials it was made out of suggests that whoever wrote it within the house.
Oh yeah, I was just about to say, like, could it have been an inside job?
Then inside of the ransom note, the amount of money that was asked for was almost exactly what the husband had received as a work bonus that year. On top of that, the officer later noted, whenever being asked to recollect about the case, whenever he went
Maybe a friend?
down to the basement door, it
family
was locked
member?
from the outside, meaning that whoever did lock it would have to have a key to the room. This all implies that whoever killed John Benet was either very closely related
Wait a
or
minute.
at least had people
Wait a minute. I think wait a minute. I think I might have heard about this case. John Benet Ramsey parents. Oh yeah, I have heard about this case. Yeah, I've seen the picture of the parents. Like everyone thinks the parents did it. Yeah,
closely related
wow.
to the family themselves. This argument got to
Fucked.
such a point in the investigation that followed that police officers got into almost screaming matches with the family, accusing them of being part of the greater conspiracy. And this is a cool one to look into. I suggest you do it. I'm not going to say anything on YouTube because in researching this, I found out that the Ramsey family liked to sue people for allegations and stuff. I'm not saying anything. I'm simply postulating.
Fuck, I already said it.
So we're
I
moving on
didn't
to
say anything. I said I think the
next
internet
one.
the internet
the Icebox
thinks.
murders were discovered on June 23rd,
yeah, I don't know.
1965.
I don't know what they
this
did.
happened when Marvin Martin called the Houston police saying that he hadn't heard from his aunt and uncle in a while. Fred and Edwina Roger were an elderly couple and he was worried about their well-being. When the police got to the household, everything seemed fine until one of the officers went and checked the fridge. They opened it up and saw several pieces of what appeared to be cut beef laying open in the fridge. Before shutting the door, he looked down in the ice tray
Uh-oh.
and saw
Eyeballs?
2 heads and realized that was not beef he was looking at. It was the Rogers. The chief and only suspect of the case was their son, Charles Rogers, who lived with the couple, however, was never seen again after these murders. Charles was always known as a sort of recluse who didn't really interact with anyone as a part of the community around him. The only blood that was found in the house was in the upstairs bathroom, where it seemed the cuts had taken place, and a few drops of blood that led into Charles' room. However, and this is where it gets weird, so Charles was always seen leaving his house very early in the morning and coming back very late at night, but those who did know him say he always had a lot of money despite not having a job. Supposedly, people close to Charles have said that he worked with the government in a very secretive manner. Not only that, but Charles had been working a very successful IT job which he quit shortly before moving back in with his parents. This has led many to believe that Charles was a CIA agent. And not only that, people have placed Charles in Dallas, Texas on the day of the Kennedy assassination.
Oh, wow.
Which means many people think that Charles helped assassinate John F. Kennedy as part of the Kennedy conspiracy. So, following that train of logic, perhaps his parents were getting a little too close to figuring out what he was doing, and either him or the organization he was a part of had to silence them. Although that still doesn't explain why they were like made into hot dog packets in the fridge, but I don't know, maybe to add some pizzazz because they were bored. I don't know. Who is B.D. Cooper refers to the only unsolved hijacking to ever occur in American aviation history.
Hijacking.
On November 24th of 1971, a Boeing 727 was
I think
flying
Lebino made a
between
video about
Portland
this.
and Seattle when a stewardess was handed a note from a man sitting down that said he had a bomb. She asked to see it. He popped open his briefcase and she saw something that she later described looked like a bomb, to which he then negotiated through the stewardess with the captain of the plane of what to do next. He had the captain land the plane early and get everyone off board who is not an essential flight operator. Once landed, he demanded several $1 million in a briefcase. Also, in the meantime, everyone who interacted with him said he was incredibly kind, that he was very nice, slow talking, understanding, and even talked to the stewardess about how everything's going to be okay and how she was such a bright young woman with a beautiful future. He also knew a lot about planes, having them negotiate for enough gas that he knew he would need to get to his next destination, as well as what crew were needed to continue operation and what parts of the plane could be disengaged from others. The plan, he told them, was to fly the plane to Mexico, but while they were on the way and in the air, he told everyone to get into the cockpit of the plane and seal themselves in. While they were in there, they saw that the rear door of the plane opened, which, mind you, DB Cooper had said before takeoff, do not pressurize the cabin of the plane because this was his plan. They asked him from the cockpit if he needed any help. He said that he was good, to have a great day, and then they never heard from him again. Also,
So weird.
whenever leaving the cabin after landing, they saw the parachute was missing, which he had also demanded for in the ransom earlier. Meaning this guy had everyone go into the cockpit, he then opened the back door, strapped the money to himself, strapped on a parachute, and jumped, and he has never been found
Got away with
since.
it.
A massive
Too
manhunt
easy.
happened in the region that he jumped from trying to locate him, but none ever did. DB Cooper was, of course, proven to be an alias and not his real name,
Yeah, of
and
course.
it has been cited by many to be one of the most elaborate and possibly the most elaborate aerial heist to ever take place.
Hey, man, he
Asher
got
Debris
away
was
with
a
it.
very odd disappearance that occurred on Valentine's Day of 2000. 9-year-old Asha, who lived in Shelby, North Carolina, was, by all accounts, just a standard happy kid. However, for some reason that no one
that the
knows to
video?
this day, at
Was that my video? My computer?
2000. 9-year-old Asha, who lived in Shelby, North Carolina, was, by all accounts, just
okay,
a
weird.
standard happy kid. However, for some reason that no one knows to this day, at 4 a.m. on Valentine's Day, she filled up a backpack with her clothes and walked out in the middle of a thunderstorm and began walking down Highway 18. A car that was driving by noticed her and thought it was weird that a kid's walking in the middle of the thunderstorm on the side of the highway. And upon getting out to go talk to her, she ran into the woods and has never been seen since. Normally with a story like this, I would say, well, maybe something bad was happening at home, or
Yeah, maybe she wanted to run away from, like,
or
yeah.
maybe she was being tricked by some adult around her, something like that. But in all the research I've done, a bunch of kids would always stay at Ash's house. Her other siblings are perfectly fine. The parents seem entirely caring, and there's no signs that it was something at home that was.
That's weird. That's weird. Oh man, that's kind of creeping on supernatural shit right there.
doing it. And then on the other end, her parents were very careful with who they allowed Asha to talk to, and it wasn't like she was on some online chat room talking to some stranger, because there wasn't even a computer in the home and they don't know where she could have gotten
That
access
is weird.
to one. The family placed a billboard of Asha at the spot she ran into the woods at, and every year on Valentine's Day they hold a march to the billboard as a means of raising awareness for the case. A year and a half later, her backpack was found wrapped in a plastic bag at a construction site. But other than that, there's been no new developments in the case. Police have said that in November of 2020, there was a new lead they were following, so hopefully something comes from that. This one's especially bizarre, as not only is there no answer, but there's seemingly not even a rhyme or reason to why any of this occurred in the first place. The smiley face murders is a theory that between the 1990s and 2010s, several accidents in which men fell into the water and drowned weren't accidents at all. This theory was made by retired detectives who, after reviewing case files for a long time in their career, discovered that there was an odd occurrence that happened between supposedly drunk college-age athletic men who went to a lake and drowned in an accident, and smiley face graffiti located nearby. Now, this is right on the border of like causation and correlation, because graffiti is always going to exist at public spots near lakes. It's just a thing that people do for some reason. And a smiley face has got to be the most simple thing in the world to draw, so it's probably the most common type of graffiti, if not one of them. But in their research, 45 men who all match the same sort of style, specifically their way of life and their ethnicity as being white and in college, but supposedly a connection exists between specifically 45 men across 11 different states who were all white college-age guys who had drowning accidents. This is a weird one. If it was one connected killer, then it would be dozens of killings that took place over the course of 30 years for a motive that we don't even know how to speculate on yet, or they could just be accidents. Who knows? The kidnapping and killing of
That
Amber
seems very, that seems very loose.
Hagerman occurred on January the 13th of 1996. 9-year-old Amber was playing on a bicycle with her 5-year-old brother Ricky in an abandoned parking lot in Arlington, Texas. Basically, there's an old grocery store that shut down in the middle of their sort of residential area that the kids would play around on their bicycles and hop on a ramp and whatever. Ricky had biked home shortly before a neighbor saw what he said was a black pickup truck pull up, open up the door, grab Amber off of her bicycle, throw her into the car while she was screaming, and drive away.
Oh,
this
God.
sparked a big manhunt, as you could imagine, to locate Amber. However, sadly, 4 days later, her body was found roughly 5 miles away. To make it even more tragic, the coroner's report had said that she had lived for 2 days of that ordeal and was abused in various ways. This sparked a huge outrage in the local community, who said it was ridiculous that this had occurred so close to them, and the fact that the body was found relatively nearby, that if other people around had just known what to be on the lookout for or what truck to look for, maybe Amber could have been saved. This led to the invention of the Amber Alert system.
Really? That's where it started? Holy shit. Wow. Huh.
With the idea
Learn something
being
new every
that
day.
maybe if people locally had just known to look out for this black pickup truck, then maybe Amber could have lived. So hopefully that same thing never has to happen to another child. The Jamison family deaths is a really weird mystery that happened whenever the Jamison family's car was discovered on October 8th of 2009. The family, who consisted of Bobby, Sherilyn, and their daughter Madison, had their truck found on the side of a rural road with their dog in the back seat, who was severely malnourished but alive. Whenever the Sheriff's Department of Latimer County, Oklahoma came to investigate the car, they found inside of it their IDs, their wallets, phones, and a briefcase containing $32,000 in cash. The more information that came out about this, the weirder it got. They went and reviewed the front door camera of the Jamison's family house that morning, and all you can see is the 3 family members in a sort of trance, moving what seems to be camping gear to the car from the house, along with the briefcase containing $32,000. There was a massive search effort that happened in the area around the truck, however nothing was found. That was until 4 years later when a hunter discovered their bodies, which were now skeletonized, located only 3 miles away from where the truck was. Cause of death was never determined, and this raises more weird questions. If they were just lying on top of the ground dead, then why didn't the search parties that had combed over the area a ton
That is weird.
find them? So were they killed somewhere else and then moved back there? And also, what were they doing in the first place? They drove the car in next to the woods, parked with their dog still inside of it, all got out, walked away, and died.
Oh yeah. Oh, the dogs are left inside of it. That is weird.
While leaving the cash in the car. The leading theory is perhaps Bobby got himself involved with drugs, and this was a sort of means of paying off some debt he owed to a cartel of sorts. But it's also worth mentioning that their pastor said after the fact that Bobby had come to him saying that he heard spirits speaking to him after he began reading a satanic Bible and began to practice in the occult. That same pastor said that Bobby was struggling with it before he quit talking about it, and then this happened. So make of that what you will. Elaine Nix went missing on September 20th of 1999. Elaine would regularly drive to a payphone at a nearby gas station at night to talk to her boyfriend, who was a few counties over. There wasn't a phone at Elaine's house, so she would drive out to talk to him on a pretty regular basis. However, one night shortly after hanging up with her boyfriend on the phone, she was never seen again. The next day, her car was found parked next to the payphone, and in the surveillance footage of the nearby gas station, you can see in the corner what seems to be a truck pull up next to hers before driving away. 9 days later, 17 miles away, her body was found abandoned in the woods. No cause of death was determined, and the only confession that came forward was later proven to be a hoax. The leading theory is that whoever's in the truck kidnapped her before driving her away. However, there doesn't seem to be signs of a struggle or anything related, implying some to think that she willingly got in the truck with him, which again doesn't make sense, unless it was someone she maybe knew. Whatever the real solution, there have been no new leads since the case originally began, and it has gone cold. We are now on to tier 3 and getting into some of the more gruesome stuff.
Oh god, here we go. One of them is just called Bloop. What the fuck is Bloop? How can that be gruesome?
Beginning with the Hinterkaifeck massacre. On March 13th of 1922, it was discovered that a family of 6 was murdered at their home in Hinterkaifeck, Germany. However, not only that, but that the killer had lived for roughly 3 days with the bodies of his victims. Upon research of this, some of the more eerie clues started to come together. The family consisted of an elderly couple, their widowed daughter, and the daughter's 2 children, along with the maid who lived on the property. 6 months before the murders, the previous maid had quit, saying the house was haunted and she heard footsteps at night. A few days before the murders occurred, the grandfather had told his neighbor that he saw footprints in the snow leading from the woods to his barn.
What the fuck?
The 2 reported hearing the same footsteps in the attic at night.
Oh, that's creepy. Oh, that's fucking creepy as hell. Jesus Christ. I mean, it's probably not something supernatural. It's probably just someone sneaking onto their property at night or something, trying to steal shit, if I had to guess.
While it can't be precisely determined, what it seems happened is that the killer led the father, grandfather, their daughter, and one of her children into the barn before murdering them with a pickaxe. The killer then walked into the house and killed the 2-year-old son along with the maid. What's really creepy is, like, the next day, kids came from the next farm over and peered in through the windows to see if anyone was home, didn't see anyone, and left, not knowing that the bodies were still there out in the barn and in the house. And this happened like 3 times. The mailman had come by and peeked in the window to see if anyone's home, but couldn't see anybody. It wasn't until a repairman came, who was hired by the grandfather a week earlier, that he walked into the barn, saw the bodies, and reported it to the police. More haunting details of the story came up. Like, whenever the police investigated the house, they found that there was food made and milk still set out, as if this person was just casually living around the bodies. Also, details like a vagrant who was passing by the region said that on one of the nights that would have been while the killer was still there and the family was murdered, a man who was covering his face and holding a lantern walked out to him while he was sitting at the front of the farm's property and told him to leave. It's a weird, very gruesome case that has never been solved and probably never will be given its age. Ida Lowry was murdered in Milwaukee, Wisconsin on April 23rd of 1960. A man named Edwin Smith was driving through downtown Milwaukee when he heard a woman screaming from a nearby alley. When he ran to assist the woman, he found 76-year-old Ida Lowry in intense pain and bleeding a lot. Whenever he tried to move her, she began screaming, saying that she can't, so he then ran to a nearby phone where he called the police. Ida then died at the hospital. The only thing that she could get out through the pain was that the person who murdered her, quote, worked at the bridge. The more research that was done into Ida's life afterwards got more and more odd. Like, for example, her husband had died in 1950, to which afterwards she became very eccentric and doing things like dumpster diving. That combined with things like she wasn't able to afford her $10 a week rent to the apartment that she lived in.
Wonder how much that translates to now. $10 a month. Oof. Wouldn't that be nice?
Make you think that she was hard on her luck. However, during the investigation, they found $7,000 in her bank account that she seemingly never touched.
Oh, that's like, that must be a shit ton. 7,000. If rent was $10 a month, she had 7K.
So either she was living some sort of weird double life, or she was simply an eccentric person who had money but wouldn't pay rent for some reason, who was murdered while in the alleys doing her dumpster diving thing. Who knows? The Axeman of New Orleans was a killer who killed between May of 1918 and October of 1919. The majority of the victims were the impoverished Italians of the New Orleans area, leading many to think that it was possibly race motivated. While at the same time, it seems the targets appear to be women, with only men murdered if they so happen to be near a woman at the time, such as a husband, leading others to believe that perhaps it's misogynistic. All in all, the axe murder had a total of 12 victims, with every one of the killings being very brutal as it was conducted with axe. However, very famously, on March the 13th, he wrote a letter to the police station saying that he was going to kill again that night at precisely 11:45. However, he really liked jazz music, so if a house was playing jazz music, he wouldn't kill them. So, that night, across all of New Orleans, every bar and house had its windows open playing jazz music as loud as it could. And sure enough, that night, the axe murderer didn't kill anyone. A massive manhunt was conducted that mostly resulted in police just beating up poor Italian people because like people were being murdered in the community, so they assumed it was someone in the community and not an attack on the community, so they attacked the community. And despite the relatively high victim count,
God, that's funny.
The axe murderer has never been identified. Father John Kerrigan disappeared from Ronan, Montana in 1983. Being the priest of a prominent Catholic church, that didn't really make a lot of sense, especially after his vehicle was discovered a few days later. Along Highway 35, his bloodied clothes were found in a bag, when later in Polson, the aforementioned vehicle was found as well. In the vehicle was $1,200 supposedly taken from the father himself, as well as a bloodied shovel and pillowcase in the trunk. And that's it. They found a vehicle with a bloody shovel and pillowcase and money and the clothes, and it never went further than that. This is believed to be part of the larger Franciscan priest murders. See, Father Kerrigan was accused a few years previous to his disappearance as being involved with doing bad things to children. And around that time, several of the priests from the position that Kerrigan was previously a priest at had been murdered. That, combined with the fact that the $1,200 was just left in the vehicle, leads many to believe that perhaps this was some form of vigilante justice.
Moral
despite
killing.
Seemingly a huge amount of evidence, no progression in the case has been made. Cindy Song disappeared after being dropped off at her apartment at 4 a.m. on Halloween of 2001. She had been at a college party with her friends, and after getting dropped off, investigators know that she made it back to her room as the bags that she was carrying were found in it. What most people believe to have happened, since there is no sign of forced entry or struggle within the room itself, was that Cindy got back to her room, dropped off her bag, and then went across the street to a 24-hour store which she frequented. But sadly, after that, she was never seen again and seemingly disappeared into thin air. It doesn't seem to be a disappearance in any sort, at least not like a runaway you would think. As a matter of fact, whenever they went into her room to investigate, they saw concert tickets for a concert that was coming up in a couple days, as well as an order form for a bunch of clothes she had just ordered, and none of it gave the sign of someone who's trying to get away from their life. Also, I have to mention this next part like this because unless I'm missing something, like, why isn't the okay, so anyway, a guy named Hugo Solinsky was a serial killer who was caught and convicted of killing a bunch of people. He eventually confessed to all of his crimes and said that his partner had kidnapped and murdered Cindy. As a matter of fact, whenever Hugo's yard was searched, because he said there was bodies under it, they found a ton of different bodies of people that he had murdered, including his partner. Hugo had said that his partner had killed Cindy, although he never told Hugo where he put the body. And since the partner's dead now, there's no real way of telling.
So he killed his partner?
So that seems pretty cut and dry, right? Like, of course, you can't prove that in court or whatever, but the serial killer said that his partner killed this person and buried the body somewhere, but we can't ask him because he's dead now. But everywhere I read, they're like, I guess there will never be any leads, or we'll never know what really happened to Cindy Song. But like, can't we like assume at least? Like, the dude's naming all these people that him and his partner killed, and then he specifically says that there's this one you'll never find. Yet everyone on the internet, they're like, I
don't know. Yeah.
Todd McAfee was the owner of a tomato farm in Manatee County, Florida. He lived on a house at the tomato farm itself, and it was custom every morning that he would come out to the gate, unlock it, and let the workers in. However, on August 18th, his foreman thought it was odd that he didn't come to let them in, so while the men were working, he went to the house to check on him. Looking at Todd's vehicle that was parked up front, the keys were still in the car as well as a bag of groceries. In the truck was blood as well as Todd's bloodied glasses. This caused the foreman to call the police, which during an investigation, Todd's body was discovered in a ditch 2 miles away. He had been shot 4 times before being left in the ditch, and since Todd was known for having a very expensive and ornate gun collection, which was missing after the murders, it's believed that's why he was targeted and killed. The leading theory is that Todd was getting back from his home and maybe saw something amiss in his house, which would explain why he left the groceries in the passenger seat before going inside and being attacked, before being thrown into the bed of the truck, shot to death at some point, and thrown into the ditch. What's wild is, despite the prominence that this person had in the community and supposedly as loud of a crime that this is, no one has ever been arrested or tried for it. The only lead is that people driving by the night before said they saw an orange van in front of Todd's house. However, that orange van itself has never been identified. Jenny Lao Chang was a 19-year-old student at San Francisco State University. On September 11th of 1977, Jenny had left her apartment telling her roommate that she was going to a study session that evening. Jenny didn't come home that night, to which the next day the roommate informed campus security, to which at nearly the same time on the 4th floor reading room of the library, faculty opened up that morning to find her body naked, stabbed, and beaten in the corner of a reading room.
Jesus.
So the theory would have to be, since those rooms are locked up every night, that it had to be someone who would have a key
Holy
to that room
fuck,
who could
dude.
have killed her. However, on a campus that size, that's anywhere from 400 to 1,200 people depending. And here's what's especially wild about this whole case. That's it. A girl was murdered and placed into a building at the college that she attended with supposedly a ton of faculty,
And no
security,
investigation?
and other people around, and all of it somehow got away with. To give you an idea of how little people knew about this killing itself, several people theorized that it was a Zodiac killer, which it wasn't because there was no Zodiac scheme, but that's how desperate people were to find an answer for this. Arthur Buddy Schumacher disappeared from his home on July 24th of 1925 in Wauwatosa, Wisconsin. Buddy was known to go with his friends train hopping in order to get to their favorite swimming hole in the summer. However, one day after coming back with a group of friends and then splitting to walk off to his house, he disappeared. 7 weeks later, his body was found less than a mile away, very horribly mutilated, with a handkerchief placed in his throat. The initial story of the other 3 boys was that whenever they hopped off the train, there was a hobo on it who had creeped them out. This sparked a huge war on the homeless in the town, in which every vagabond was being sweared at and pelted by people nearby, and the police were just arresting them en masse. However, the boys later changed their story, saying that it was a homeless person and they made it up, and they came up with all these wild stories like seeing him get chased away by some crazy killer, and it became clear that the boys were just saying stuff that they thought was cool. There were a few people who were picked out as possibly maybe a suspect, but every time that a witness would come forward with evidence, they'd recant or change a story on it, and it seems sadly like the story of Buddy will simply remain unsolved. The Hall Mills murders occurred on September 16th of 1922 and was the largest covered in United States history at the time. Eleanor Mills and Edward Hall were found both shot in a field near Somerset, New Jersey. Both of them were shot in the head, the woman being shot 3 times. The man was positioned with his hat over his face and a business card at his feet. The woman was bruised, and the autopsy later said that her tongue was cut out, and they were positioned to be romantically touching each other, between them being a series of torn up love letters between the two, as it was later figured out that Edward Hall was the pastor of a church and Eleanor Mills was in the choir, and the two had been having an affair. The first, only, and most obvious suspects was that of Edward's wife and her brothers. The details of the court trial following this murder are so weird. The only witness to it was the farm's owner, a woman by the name of Jane Gibson, who was later called in media as the Pig Girl, who claimed that while getting the chickens out in the morning, she saw silhouettes of people over by the hillside where they were murdered before hearing gunshots, so she hopped on her donkey and began to chase after them. Although her story kept changing back and forth, and for some reason I couldn't find it.
Hopped on her donkey, man. High chase speed.
On a hospital bed to testify for some reason.
High speed chase guy.
Theories of this case went from everything to the KKK did it, to the Illuminati, to a double suicide where the gun just disappeared for some reason. And while most, including myself, believe that Edward's wife and her brothers did it, the case is still officially unsolved. However, it's so popular that it gave rise to several books, plays, and movies that occurred afterwards, and some even believe that the characters were the inspiration to the lead characters in The Great Gatsby. Which, spoilers,
really?
If, you don't know The Great Gatsby, but like...
Yeah, I love that book.
Book's been out for what, like 100 years now, like catch up. The Delphi murders took place on Valentine's Day of 2017 in Delphi, Indiana. Abigail Williams and her friend Liberty German were going on a hike near the Moonbridge Trail of the Delphi area. At 2:07 p.m., Liberty, also who went by Libby, posted a picture of the two of them on the hike to Instagram, and that was the last anyone ever heard from them. After the girls didn't come back, a search and rescue then went out, to which found their bodies located off the side of the trail. When they didn't return home that day, a search and rescue party went out in order to find the girls, who then found their bodies located just off the trail that night. To this day, 4 years later, the cause of death has not been announced publicly, supposedly because of the details of the case. However, it has been announced that on analyzing Libby's phone, she had taken pictures of the man that supposedly killed them. In the pictures that Libby took, we can see a man who is wearing jeans and what appears to be a denim jacket walking towards the girls. Not only that, but she took a short recording when the phone was in her pocket, which is amazing that she had the foresight to think of that, in which we can hear the man say the phrase "down the hill." However, sadly, having that short audio clip and this one sort of blurry picture isn't enough to exactly ID someone off of, but it's so frustrating that the answers are that close, and on top of it that the girls possibly knew what their fate would be, but we can't really make anything of it. 21-year-old Frauke Liebs disappeared from a bar on June 20th in 2006. While at a pub in Paderborn, Germany, she asked to use her friend's phone to make a call as hers was dead. Shortly after making the call at 11 p.m., she said she had to go, to which she left the pub and was never seen alive again. At 1 a.m. that night, her friend received a text that she was coming home and to not worry about her. However, she never came home and her friend went to the police. It was determined that the text was sent from nearly 35 kilometers away. Over the next week, while next to the police's orders, the friend continued to call Frauke, and every time she would ask a question, Frauke would simply dodge it or give some sort of shifty answer. That was until one day a call was made while the friend was there with Frauke's sister, who asked the question, "Are you being held captive?" To which Frauke supposedly said yes very quietly and quickly before saying no very loudly. The phone then went out, and that was the last call made. Jeez. October 4th of that year, her skeleton was found in the woods near Lichtenau, Germany. It's bizarre given that she was alive for a while, was in a situation where she couldn't call out, but was also in a situation that she could accept calls, and despite all of that, no leads have been made in the case. We are now on to tier 4, and this is where we get some of the spooky ones. Zygmunt Adamski disappeared from his home on June 6 of 1980 in Yorkshire, England. At 3:30 p.m. that day, he left to go get groceries, kissed his wife goodbye, and disappeared off the face of the earth. Zygmunt was a relatively wealthy businessman who was happy and had life going for him, so it didn't make sense that he would just up and vanish. 5 days later, 20 miles away, his body was found on top of a 12-foot coal pile in Todmorden. To add to the weirdness of it, the coal facility had been used all day, and somehow everyone missed a dead body on top of one of the piles. Not only that, but the pile around the body was perfectly intact, implying that no one climbed up it, especially as no one could have climbed up it without making a scene, and that the body had to be lowered from above, which again didn't make any sense as it was just in the middle of a lot. He was very clean and put together, and it didn't look like he was living on the streets while he was out. But to add a layer of weirdness, his clothes were oddly placed on him. For example, his shirt was missing and his jacket was buttoned as if someone didn't know how to do the buttons and did one inside out, one misplaced, etc. Same can be said about his shoes and pants. According to the coroner, he had died earlier that day, but what was really weird to the coroner report was that he had burns around his shoulders and neck that were covered in a sort of green goo that no one could identify.
Oh, weird.
After months of deliberation, the coroner eventually said that he died of a heart attack because that was all he could really make of it. To give you an idea of how absolutely absurd this is, every article I found on this talked about how it was related to aliens because
of the green
I
shit.
don't know what else you'd explain this as. Terry Sutter was 15 years old when he disappeared on September the 1st of 1973. His mom had taken him that night to stay with his grandmother in Frankfort, Michigan, as the plan was he was to go bowling with friends before staying the night at his grandma's. However, after missing curfew, his family began to look for him, to which his body was discovered the next day on the banks of Lake Michigan. Here's where details of the story get kind of weird. So, general consensus, at least from all the research I did, seems that he wasn't actually going bowling with friends. He was instead sneaking out to go to a party by the lake, which makes sense, kids do that kind of thing. And supposedly he disappeared from the party at some point. During the autopsy, it was found that his lungs were not filled with water, but instead filled with sand, implying that it was most likely murder, as it seems someone had held his face in the sand enough for him to inhale it and suffocate. But possibly the weirdest part of all is that as soon as he was buried, his grave was vandalized. The headstone was then repaired, to which it was vandalized again, and this occurred over and over.
Oh, that is weird.
Ripping out flowers and spray painting on the tombstone, that eventually the family decided to simply bury him at an unmarked grave. So the question of who killed him, who's vandalizing his grave, are they the same person?
You didn't think to have anybody stand by and watch the...
Who knows? Also,
tombstone?
Everyone commenting on this story is like super mean about it, because they're all like, well, maybe he just did something wrong. Like, oh, hold on, let's not attack a 15-year-old kid who died in the 70s over nothing, my word. Glenn and Bessie Hyde set out to raft the Colorado River Rapids on October the 20th of 1928. Glenn was looking to clear it in the fastest record time, and Bessie was looking to be the first woman in history to get through them. However, after they didn't make their scheduled stop, a search plane located their empty canoe on December the 19th. The canoe was upright with all of the gear and equipment inside it perfectly fine. Picture evidence as well as a journal log from Bessie seems to show that they made it to mile 226 marker, however their canoe was found at 237. And despite the fact that the rapids should eventually spit out whatever gets sucked under them, neither of them have ever been seen again. The story is especially famous because over the years several people have claimed to be the living Glenn and Bessie, such as one woman who, while on a tour of the area, proclaimed that she is the surviving Bessie and that she killed her abusive husband in order to get away from him. However, that didn't really pan because like her details of the story didn't make sense and she just wanted the attention. But she's not the only one, as it became a sort of joke for a while to say that certain famous female kayakers were the living version of Bessie who killed her awful husband to get away. Which, like, the two were on a honeymoon. I think it's a little harsh to just be like, yeah, he was abusive, but whatever, moving on. The Sauter children disappearance occurred on Christmas Eve of 1945. In Fayetteville, West Virginia, George, Jenny, and their 9 children had just gone to bed in order to prepare for Christmas the next day. However, they awoke in the night to see the house was on fire, to which George and Jenny made it out with 4 of their kids, although the 5 others seemingly perished in the fire. However, this is where it gets weird. No evidence of the other 5 children was ever found. This led the optimistic family to believe that their children were still alive out there somewhere, but the police in the area were immediately dismissive of this. Some of the details, for example, the fire marshal had ruled that the house had burned down due to faulty wiring, but that didn't make sense to the family, as a week earlier they had just had all the wiring approved. See, George was a very open political critic of the Sicilian mafia, and believes that his children were kidnapped as a part of revenge against him. Not only that, but shortly before the fire, George's children have said that they saw strange black cars following them around. At 12:30 a.m., after everyone else had gone to bed, Jenny received a phone call from a woman who was cackling on the other side before hanging up. She then went back to bed, which at around 1 a.m., she heard something hit the roof of the house and then roll around. Given the fact that a neighbor later reported seeing people throwing, quote, balls of fire, this sounds like she may have been hearing fire bombs of some sort being thrown on top of the house. Not only that, but during the fire, George got up and tried to go to all the rooms to get the kids. However, when he got to the rooms of 5 of the children, whenever he walked in, they were not in their beds. A neighbor who was watching the fire from her porch said that they saw a car drive by with what looked to be several children in the back seat. Not only that, but a waitress then said the next morning at a diner she saw the 5 children come in with 2 Italian men who became aggressive whenever she tried to speak to the children. Keep in mind, while the police investigated all this, they were constantly criticized by the parents as being slack and not actually wanting to figure out what happened. Because it's weird to have supposedly 5 people die in a house fire and having no evidence of their remains. But that, combined with everything I'm saying now, didn't seem to be enough to motivate them for some reason. It got really weird whenever one of the officials said that he had actually found a heart of one of the children in the fire but couldn't bear to show the family.
God.
So he put it in a box and buried it on the property for some reason. So the father, thinking that this man is lying, goes and digs up the box, finds supposedly a heart in it, sends it for analysis to find out it's beef liver. So for some reason, this dude wanted him to think that it was his kid's heart so he'd stop looking. It gets even weirder when years later, the dad found a piece of a vertebrae in the area that the fire occurred. So you think, oh, that's it. But then he sends the vertebrae for analysis and it's from like an adult. And what had actually happened is whenever he bought dirt to cover up the area the fire occurred, that there was human remains.
What the fuck?
And then years later, they got an anonymous picture in the mail with a picture of a grown-up boy, to which the letter said was their child. Then the private investigator they hired went missing whenever he went looking in Kentucky, and the police continued to not like figure out anything.
Shit show.
And it's this really weird long murder case that technically is still going on today, as several of the siblings and their children are still alive and trying to figure out whatever happened to these 5 kids. The mystery of room 1046 came to light on January the 2nd of 1935 in Kansas City. A man by the name of Roland Owen checked into the hotel saying that he wanted a room on one of the top floors and had nothing with him besides a toothbrush and a comb. Things started to get weird whenever the maid came into the room in order to clean up.
Oh, I think I heard about this. Yeah, I think there was I think Netflix did a like an unsolved true crime documentary series. I think this might have been one of the mysteries they covered
for him after the first day, to which when she walked in there, he was sitting in the room in complete darkness in a chair in the corner. So she did her stuff, cleaned up, and when she came back later to bring towels back, he was still in darkness, lying asleep on the made bed while he was fully clothed, with a note lying next to him that said, "Dawn, I will be back in 15 minutes, wait." A couple days later, when the maid came into the room, he was doing the exact same thing, sitting upright in a chair. Only this time, he answered a phone call to which he said, "No, Dawn, I do not want to eat. I just had breakfast." Also, she didn't realize until leaving, but the door was locked from the outside.
This guy's like schizophrenic or something.
Whenever she came into the room. See, the way old hotel rooms would work was there was a lock on the outside and a lock on the inside. That way, if someone was leaving or management wanted to lock a door, they used the outside lock, and if someone wanted to lock others out, they'd use the inside lock. So whenever she walked up to the door and saw that the door was locked, she assumed that he had left for the day, but upon opening it and seeing that he's still sitting over there in the corner, that means someone locked him in the room. When she came back that day to return towels, the door was locked, to which a very deep, booming voice on the other side of the door says, "No, leave, we don't need towels." On top of that, the guest in the room next to him had said that over the night they would hear tons of voices in the room of men and women swearing, cursing, and going on in a sort of party. But that also didn't make sense as
a cult shit, maybe? I don't fucking know. That's weird.
The hotel at night. This culminated after 6 days when the bellhop received word from management
6 days
that the phone in Roland's room was left off the hook. The bellhop goes to the door and after no response lets himself in, to which he sees the room in pristine condition, but Roland laying completely naked on top of the fully made bed. He walks over, puts the phone back on the hook and leaves, to which an hour later he gets another call from management that the phone's off the hook again. This time when he goes into the room, the bellhop finds Roland in the corner, stabbed multiple times with his head in his hands.
Jesus.
Blood adorning the curtains, the walls, the floor, the roof, everything. Not only that, but there were restraint marks on his wrist and ankles showing that he had been held down. After that, it got even weirder. The coroner's report had showed that the injuries had occurred several hours before the body was found, meaning that he should have been bleeding out or at least stabbed whenever the bellhop went into the room. Whenever the police investigated the room, they saw that Roland had no items. There was no clothes or any other personal effects. And as you can imagine, Roland Owen was an alias. They then found out that he had been staying for about a week at the hotel next door under a different name. And then, to top it all off, before he was going to be buried by the state, a check came in with a bouquet of flowers, and all the money needed to pay off for an actual funeral, along with a note that said, "Love forever, Lucille." I don't know what to make of any of that.
Yeah,
That's your all's.
that's
I
just
can't
so
speculate
weird, dude.
besides the fact that it was, of course, a devil cult murder.
Yeah.
I mean, like Dawn, Lucille, devil, Lucifer, like it all makes sense to me. That's what the voices
I was
were.
really thinking there was a
And he
cult,
got stabbed
maybe.
to death by the devil, and I don't see what the issue is. Malachi Logan disappeared on May 15th of 1988. She was 9 years old and at the time was playing at a basketball court next to her apartment that was in Saluda, South Carolina. She was playing basketball with her friends before she got on a bike and headed home, which was only about 300 yards away and in direct line of sight from the basketball court. After Malachi didn't return home, neighbors and police began looking for her.
Oh, I think I heard about this.
Details were found, such as her bicycle was in the parking lot of the apartments, indicating that either she made it there or whoever kidnapped her brought it there for some reason. The case was completely cold until October 1st of 1990. A deer hunter who was hunting off of the South Carolina 34 highway found a skull on the ground, which was later tested and confirmed to be Malachi's. However, this wasn't confirmed until DNA testing was made available in 1998, a whole decade after her disappearance took place. These are especially haunting as there seems to be no credence or explanation given to any of it. She simply disappeared and then her skull was found, and none of it makes any sense. The Buckskin Girl is one of the most famous Jane Doe cases. On April 24th of 1981, 3 boys in Troy, Ohio found a girl lying in a ditch. The reason for the name the Buckskin Girl was that she was wrapped in a buckskin poncho. Cause of death was determined to be a strangulation as well as blunt force trauma to the head and neck. What's so wild about the case is the links that people went to in order to identify her. It got to the point that they were analyzing the pollen samples on the inside of her sweater, as well as hair follicles to determine if she had any drug habits, and then using that chemical compound of the drug to determine what region it was made in. They pulled out all the stops, which eventually proved to be successful when in 2018 she was identified as Marcia King. The reason no one could identify her is because the body was found in Ohio and she was an Arkansas native. It's believed that she was a hitchhiker who was eventually picked up and killed by someone near her, and it is a sad statement that rather than finding out who the guilty party is, the success in this case is simply finding out who was killed. We are now down starting in the deep end at tier 5. Paula Jean.
Wait, what was the bloop case? Oh, I was waiting for the bloop. I don't think I missed it, did I? Whatever.
Weldon left for a short day hike from college on December 1st of 1946. She was going to something called the Long Trail in North Bennington, Vermont. She packed no extra gear and gave no indication that she'd be gone for any time, and as a matter of fact, invited friends to go hike with her, although they declined. Hikers passed her as she made her way up the trail, however, she simply vanished. Her disappearance is especially odd, considering as frequently as the trail has traveled, there's been no signs or evidence of her since. The only suspect named in the case was a lumberjack who was mad at his girlfriend and was seen driving to the area that she would have disappeared from, but that's circumstantial at best. The community criticized the local police heavily for their mishandling of information with the case, and it eventually led to the creation of the Vermont State Police. The case of the embalmed severed head is exactly what it says. On December 12th of 2014,
Severed
a teenager
embalmed
who was in
head was found.
Pittsburgh called the police and simply said, "I found a human head."
Okay.
Located off the side of a walking trail was exactly what he said, a human head. Exact identity cannot be determined as the embalming fluids messed with the DNA sample, and the cut around the neck seemed professional, as if whoever did it knew what they were doing. Whenever the head was found, the eyes were closed. Upon opening the eyelids, they discovered that there was no eyes, but instead these red rubber balls made to fill in as replacements. From isotopic analysis, they were able to determine that at the time she died, that paramedics were attempting to administer CPR, which is cool, I guess. However, that makes it even weirder because that means that this person's death should have been cataloged, and yet how did their head end up in the woods near Pittsburgh with no identification or anything? The leading theory is that this came from something called body brokers, which are people that sell human body parts. But even then, why would it just be abandoned on the side of a trail? Like, it's so weird. The Monster of Florence was the name given to a serial killing spree of 16 people in Florence, Italy, from 1968 to 1985. Given how spaced out the murders occurred, it actually wasn't determined that these killings were connected until the 4th killing in 1981. All of the killings occurred to couples in sort of lover's lane or date locations. While several people were named and accused, they tended to be usual suspects, and there wasn't really any leads made in the case. Over the years, several people were named as potential suspects. However, no one was officially tried. And despite the fact that 16 people were murdered, there's never been any real headway in the case. To give you an idea of how little information there is to go on, a 2018 article I was reading theorized that perhaps it was the Zodiac Killer. Which,
Again,
just because someone was murdered in the 70s and 80s does not mean it was
this was
the
in
Zodiac
Italy,
Killer.
wasn't it?
This was in Italy.
Okay,
Come on,
yeah.
guys. Case of Diego
what the fuck?
Quing. Again,
Dude,
sorry.
okay, you could just say all these murders were for the fucking Zodiac Killer, dude. What the hell? Goddamn, dude. Zodiac Killer, man. He was a time traveler. He could teleport from location to location at will. He was a supernatural being. God damn, dude.
Pronunciations refers to a 19-year-old girl who went missing from Nanjing University.
Yao
On January the
Ai
10th of 1996, she got into a fight with the dorm building's faculty over using electronics in her room. She then stormed off upset and seemed to disappear from campus. That was until 9 days later when pieces of her body began to be found in plastic bags around the campus. This occurred over the course of several days at 8 separate locations, where it was found that her body was cut into 2,000 pieces.
What the fuck?
With some of them being cooked and boiled. Eventually, all pieces were recovered from her.
How do you even make 2,000 pieces? What the fuck? They counted it too? Kind of crazy.
Her heart, liver, and spleen. And what's so absurd about this is the question it raises. Like, who kidnapped her? Why haven't they struck again? Why were the pieces left back on the university campus? And what's the purpose of mutilating some of the body parts in that way if you're just going to bag them and leave them back on campus? Also, as soon as I typed this into Google and hit search, the first image I saw was the picture of all the body parts assembled back together.
Oh my god, dude.
So I know I always say, like, be careful when researching, but not for any like legal or reason like that or whatever.
Okay, now I'm curious. Oh god, dude. Okay, I'm seeing some blurred images. Oh god, I'm scared. Oh Jesus Christ. Oh, why do I do this to myself? Oh, do I really need to see it? No, I don't, but I am curious. Oh no, 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 no. Oh god. Okay. All right, all right. What? I'm not seeing anything here. What is that? Okay, okay, none of these images are working. Never mind. Never mind.
For your own well-being. Like, it's just 1 in the afternoon and you're chilling at your house and just see that and you're like, all right, that's how today's gonna be.
Oh no. Oh no, I found it. Oh god, oh god, oh god. It was even worse than I thought. Jesus Christ, why would they do that? Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. Oh god, dude, the internet, why? Oh.
Was the name given to the person who committed the Hammersmith nude murders. These occurred in London, England from 1964 to 65. While it's pretty well confirmed that he was responsible for at least 6 murders, there are 2 more that were speculated. The name Jack the Stripper was given as many believe this to be a Jack the Ripper copycat, and combined with the fact that his target was the same as the original Jack the Ripper, that prostitutes. Aside from several of the women who were potential targets giving the police sketches, no other leeway was made in the case. That didn't stop them from naming 7,000 suspects, although none went to trial or actually stuck. This case is interesting because a lot of people, whenever they hear about something like Jack the Ripper, they kind of have it in their head of like, oh, well, that occurred in the 1800s and people just didn't know anything back then and that's why it happened. Well, here is a very similar case occurring in the 1960s and we're none the wiser. The Seattle arsonist came into the police's mind in September 9th of 1989 whenever the Blackstock Lumber Company had a lumberyard fire. This fire left 1 firefighter dead as the building burned much more quickly than anticipated. It was determined that this pattern of fire matched that of 20 other fires that occurred around the Seattle region. Police eventually named the suspect the King of Arsonists as they didn't even know it
The
was an
hell?
arsonist until this one specific instance. The links they went to try to find out about this guy is insane. Like, for example, the fire department burnt down an abandoned strip mall using the accelerant that they believed the arsonist was using to see how fast the building would burn. They then took witnesses who were at the other arson events and had them under hypnosis to see if they could remember any new faces from the crowd. Supposedly the Seattle arsonist just disappeared and was never caught, which makes it even weirder that all this effort was going into stopping him and he didn't even need to be stopped in the first place. The Ziegler furniture store murders occurred on Christmas Eve of 1975. Police arrived to the furniture store in Winter Garden, Florida to see Tommy Ziegler shot, although alive, while his wife, mother and father-in-law and a home intruder were dead. According to Tommy, what had happened is he came into his home, which was attached to the furniture store he owned, to see that his wife and in-laws were dead and 3 men were in front of him who were robbing the shop. Tommy then pulled his gun and fired, killing one of the 3 men, to which they fired back and the other 2 escaped. There were 5 guns found at the scene with 30 rounds spent, which makes sense for Tommy's gunfight story. However, the police pinned Tommy for the murders. According to them, Tommy killed his wife and in-laws in order to receive life insurance, and then shot himself in order to look like he was the victim whenever the police arrived.
Was like the bullet that he shot himself with match his gun or something? Because that'd be pretty fucking stupid if that's
During the court trial that followed, the prosecution got 2 men together who said that they were the 2 additional robbers who broke into the house that night and that Tommy had hired them to kill his family and stage it to look like a robbery.
That's interesting, huh? I don't know if I believe that. Although, why would they come forward? Why would they come forward if it was false? I don't fucking know, huh? Whoops.
They later recanted and changed details of their story, and a lot of the details I'm about to mention get kind of fishy. Like, for example, the prosecution pointed out that Tommy liked guns and had guns, so therefore he could have bought guns to give to the people that broke in, which, yeah, anyone could. And after he was found guilty and the jury gave him life in prison, the judge changed it to the death penalty. See, the judge and Tommy had bad history, as previously they had both testified on opposite sides of a separate court case. After the trial was over, Tommy's defense team was able to look through the prosecution's notes, where they found that the one bit of evidence that the prosecution had not used was a man who lived across from the furniture store who said that about 30 minutes before the shooting started, he saw a cop standing outside with a gun drawn who then walked into the house. The defense, saying that this may mean the police involved, were immediately shut up by the prosecution as well as the police department themselves. That, combined with the very harsh ruling on top of the evidence didn't really make sense to give a man a death penalty to begin with, leads me to feel like there's some greater conspiracy going on here. Tommy Ziegler is still currently on death row and, in my opinion, didn't do it. We are now on to the second to last tier with tier 6. Charles Morgan is an interesting one. He was a very successful escrow agent who lived supposedly the perfect nuclear family lifestyle. That was until March 22nd of 1977, when after dropping his kids off at school, he disappeared. 3 days later, he showed back up to his home in Tucson, Arizona, where he ran inside to his wife, unable to speak, with his wrist handcuffed and one handcuff around his ankles. He grabbed a pen and paper and told her that he had had a hallucinogenic swabbed inside of his mouth that if he swallowed too much would go to his stomach and kill him. Over the next few days of him trying to throw up and get the hallucinogenic out, he explained to his wife that he was not an escrow agent and instead worked for the government on secret cases. He told his dad, who became worried about him after this, that if anything ever happens to him, he would leave him a letter explaining everything. However, when something did happen, the letter was never found. 2 months after this event, Charles disappeared again. 9 days into that disappearance, Charles' wife received a phone call in which the voice on the other end said, "Chuck is all right, Ecclesiastes 12, 1-8.
Ecclesiastic 12, 1-8?
Which is a Bible passage that deals with wickedness in high places. 2 days after that, Charles was found in the desert next to his empty vehicle, shot to death by his own gun, which was lying next to him. Inside of the car was a map that had a circle drawn on the current location that Charles' body was at. Further into the weirdness, during the autopsy they found that in his underwear was a $2 bill. Written on the $2 bill was 7 Spanish names from A to G. Ecclesiastes 12 was written with the 1 and the 8 circled on the serial number of the dollar bill itself. On the other side, where the founding fathers were pictured, they were each numbered 1 through 7. and a crude map was drawn that had the nearby towns labeled. A woman who identified herself over the phone as Green Eyes and claimed to be the person who called Charles' wife earlier said that she had met with Charles and that he had a briefcase full of money that he said he was using to, quote, pay off some debts. So it appears as if Charles was in some hot water, possibly with a mob agency or possibly the feds. Either way, his death was ruled a suicide. Like, come on, why do they have to do that? Every time that I see like some weird death happen, I can just be like, oh, well, I guess some criminal did it or whatever. But as soon as they say it's a suicide, I'm like, oh, okay, so I guess the state killed him. Cool. Like,
I guess the state killed him.
Why don't they just say?
I mean, it could have been, maybe. Probably not. Was the gun near him? Was the gun near his body?
Hey, that it was some crazy gang killing or whatever. That makes me feel so much better than whenever they say it's a suicide, because then I'm like, oh, well, I guess that whoever owns the police wanted him dead. That's comforting. Cool. 3 weeks later, Charles' wife was visited by two men who claimed they were with the FBI, who searched their house before leaving. Shortly after, Charles' wife called the FBI to ask about Charles' situation and try to figure out more information, when the FBI said they've never even heard of him. I think what we're witnessing here is a several faceted, layer deep conspiracy that involves a lot of parties that managed to peek its head into the real world as we know it. And the reason it's so hard to put the pieces together of what happened is because we don't know where any of the roots go. And honestly, we probably never will. The Boston word I can't say because YouTube, him, committed 4 attacks against women between December of 1989 and January of 1990. All these attacks occurred in Boston, Massachusetts, and what's especially weird about the case is despite all of his victims living and being in the middle of public areas, he was never caught or identified. The way he went about these attacks was near closing time. He would approach a desk clerk before walking behind them, pulling a gun, making them and their co-workers get into a closet where he would do things and then leaving. Somehow, despite the fact that people got a very clear look at his face as he made no effort to cover it, he was never identified or kept.
I mean, yeah, in the moment, things like that can, like, you can not really pay attention to shit like that very well, and then just like completely forget about it afterwards, just because, like, I don't know, the fear or and the panic of the moment and the trauma just kind of makes you forget.
Also, what's especially frustrating about this case is the most recent one occurred in January of 1990, which means due to the statute of limitations on violent crimes of this nature, even if he was caught today, he cannot be tried for it. So that's
really
upsetting. Anyway, the Bird Road thing I can't say was a series of attacks against 24 women from 1977 to 1979. All of these occurred in and around Coral Gables, Florida. The way that the attacker would approach his victims was he would get behind them while they were alone on the road and begin flashing his lights as an order to signal something is wrong. Whenever the women would pull over or stop, he would get out of the car, drag them into his car, do things, and then dump them on the side of the road somewhere. The first girl who was attacked a couple of days later while she was at work saw a vehicle in the parking lot that she thought was the one she was abducted by. She got tags and gave them to police, which led to a man named Luis Diaz. There were a few problems with this off the bat. For one, Luis Diaz could not speak English, or at least he claimed to not be able to speak English, while the attacker talked to every one of his victims for a while. But the police simply said that he was just lying about not being able to speak English. The case is really sad to read about because Luis Diaz was really shafted by the law around him. 8 separate women chose him out of a lineup, but as we're going to see, that was not reliable information at all. See, the reason the police wanted Luis Diaz so bad was the initial victim said that it was a Hispanic man who attacked him. However, later victims said that instead one was blonde, one had black hair but was white, so on and so forth. During the trial, Luis had to have everything said to him by an interpreter, which the prosecution continued to argue was just all a farce. At the end of it, he was convicted of several of the crimes and given 13 life sentences. However, it later turned out the detectives lied about information they had wrote in the report and brought to the stand. Also, several people failed to notice that several of these women who picked Luis out of a lineup had to have Luis pointed out to them later in court, with several of the women later recanting their statements, saying that They saw Lewis's picture in the papers and assumed that was the guy, so they just pointed at him during the lineup.
What?
Thankfully, in 2005, sadly 25 years after he was arrested, Luis Diaz was finally released from prison, to which he sued the state and won $1.3 million.
25 years?
Because people, rightfully so, shot down all of the faulty evidence used to imprison him in the first place. But that doesn't get us any closer to figure out who the actual attacker was. However, the leading theory, which has been brought forward in recent years, is an informant in a prison mentioned that there was a group of 3 different guys who would all do the same actions mentioned earlier in order to attack women in back roads around the county. This would make sense as to how some women had different descriptions of what the attacker was like compared to others, and in this circumstance, multiple attackers make sense. The Ohio prostitute murderer, also known as Dr. No, is responsible for at least 9 killings of women in and around the state of Ohio along Interstate 71. These occurred from 1981 to 2004, although it is believed that perhaps the same persons killed much more. One of the most popular destinations for this is the Union 76 truck stop. Whoever Dr. No is, it's believed that he is a trucker, as the women who have been murdered have been sex workers who were known to operate at trucking stops. The reason the name Dr. No originates is because one of the girls said to a friend that she was going to go see a client who was a regular, she called Dr. No, before she was found murdered. Hundreds of truckers who have gone under the moniker of Dr. No have been interviewed, although none have stuck. The theories of how many people the killer has actually killed stretches all the way to the buckskin girl I mentioned earlier. Thomas Hotard and Audrey Moat were found dead and missing respectively on November 25th of 1956. It turned out that Thomas and Audrey had been having an affair together. A father and son who were out hunting came across the scene, as it seems what happened is the two of them went to a secluded area in order to which someone approached the left side of the car, shot Thomas in the head before Audrey got out and ran down the hill, to which this person followed. This can be seen because Thomas is dead in the front seat of the car, and Audrey's bare footprints go down the hill, to which a pair of boots follow. Then, coming back up the hill, only the pair of boots comes up, and then a single trike mac, supposedly from a motorcycle, leaves the area. Despite that, Audrey has never been seen again, nor has any pieces of her been found.
That's kind of weird.
However, 2 weeks later, her mother-in-law received a call from her acting panicked,
Maybe they took the body?
how everyone was before hanging up abruptly. A man by the name of Ernest Aosta said years later in 1980 that his wife had killed them because she didn't like them having an affair. However, his details of it didn't really make sense. Like, for example, he said Thomas was shot outside of the car and dragged into it, which there's no evidence of that. And in the years following, because it was rules about this kind of thing, several of the people who were violently interrogated were given a truth serum, which got nothing out of them because, yeah. And despite the sort of absurdity of the case, like the 2 footprints leading to 1 footprint and leading to a motorcycle and things similar, there's never been any more information found, and it's probably going to stay a cold case forever. Sandra Valade disappeared on February 1st of 1960 after she left a YMCA swim meet. This was in Manchester, New Hampshire, to which she was found 9 days later shot to death in a snow embankment. 4 years later, a 14-year-old girl named Pamela Mason was found murdered in a similar way. These 2 deaths were thought separate. That wasn't until a woman named Rena Paquette said that the 2 of them were murdered by the same person, and if the police wanted to come talk to her, she would tell them how. When the police got there, her barn was on fire, and it was discovered that she was burning to death inside of it. She could not be saved, and for some reason, her death was ruled a suicide. And then 20 years later, her son Danny, who believed that his mother was murdered by the same person that murdered the 2 previous girls, was also shot to death. For the sake of clarity, I will say that Danny's death was later determined to be the boyfriend of his daughter. However, many still believe that the original 3 murders were all connected or committed by the same person. The fact that her son was also murdered is just dumb coincidence. The boy in the box refers to a young boy's body which was found in a box near Fox Chase, which is near Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. On February the 25th of 1957, a hunter was walking through the woods when he discovered a small boy wrapped in a flannel blanket placed in a box. The boy was badly bruised and looked like he sustained some serious forms of physical damage, as well as during the autopsy.
America's unknown child. Wait, they never found out who it was?
It was discovered that he had several surgical scars. What's most surprising about the case is no one came forward.
That
Even
is
despite
weird.
The 400,000 flyers that were printed of him across the country, and the fact that every gas pump in the state had his picture attached
That
to
is
it.
very
It's
strange.
so odd that a child who we know wasn't homeless or something of the sort, given the surgical scars, could just disappear without anyone
Maybe they were an
noticing
immigrant or
seeing them
something? I
caring.
don't know.
There are two leading theories about the boy's whereabouts. One of them came from when a private investigator hired a psychic to see what she could
Hired a
say about the
psychic?
boy,
Oh my
to which
God,
she
okay.
told him to check out a nearby foster home, which was a couple miles from where the boy was found. The idea being perhaps this boy was killed accidentally and the foster home stored him there for some reason. However, obviously, the foster home never admitted to this, which even if it was fake or true, they would say that. So it's kind of a dead end. The other was in 2002.
Foster
in which
homes
an
are
older woman
foster homes are pretty fucked up from what I've heard. So like, it'd be pretty fucking messed up and it'd be super dark. But honestly, I don't think it would shock me that much if I found out that this kid was killed or abused in the foster home.
by the name of Martha came forward saying that she was the younger sister of the boy. She claimed that when she was very young, her mother was abusive to both her and her brother, and that one night while disciplining her son, she accidentally killed him, to which she panicked and dumped his body in the woods. This story actually makes a lot more sense than you may initially think. For example, she
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense to me.
specifically said in the story that they were having beans that night, which only those who read the coroner's report would know that there were beans found in his stomach. On top of that, details like him recently receiving a haircut, as well as dying in a bathtub, which was indicated by his wrinkled fingers. A lot of this does
Huh. Okay, yeah, maybe that is what happened then.
make sense. However, the opposition to these theories claim that this was all made public information
Oh, okay, never
if
mind.
you knew how to look for it, and this woman had a history of mental illness.
Okay, never mind.
So, yeah, maybe not true.
Maybe.
Either way, the boy
Maybe
was
not.
placed in a grave
God damn it.
with the headstone of America's unknown child, and it is regularly upkept with flowers and teddy bears. The New Orleans serial killer killed 8 people in 1991. Normally what he would do is kidnap women, strangle them, and then dump them at a trash site in New Orleans. However, his second victim survived her strangulation and was able to inform the authorities. What's especially odd about this case is the fact that one woman saw him up close for an extended amount of time, has not been able to see him again, and the fact that 7 of those 8 bodies were dumped within a 3-mile radius. You would think this would be a pretty easy case to track down, especially in the modern age, but the New Orleans serial killer has never been brought in. We are now on to the final tier of unexplained.
Oh boy. Little Miss Panis, okay, Tristan Bruback, April and Jane Doe, Full Skeleton Yearbook Remains, Knockensbury and Lucy Warner Jane Doe.
Crimes with tier 7.
Oh
The
boy.
April 1990 Jane Doe is very closely related to the Ohio prostitute killer. Along Interstate 70 on April 19th of 1990, a woman was found in a various state of undressed off the side of the road. This was immediately during the time of the Ohio prostitute killer's murders, and it was believed that this was without a doubt another one of his victims. The woman, through modern technology, has been identified as 29-year-old Patricia Cronley, and she was not a prostitute, she was a mother who lived a couple hundred miles away. This leads to some scary implications. For one, the fact that a mother went missing, and even though her body was found, no one was able to properly identify it to her family. And two, the fact that this one that was discovered, compared to the other number of Jane Does that can never be discovered, was not part of a serial killing and instead was staged to look like a serial killing from somewhere else, implies that there's potentially a lot more killers and a lot more scary stuff happening than we're aware of. Warner Jane Doe is one of the darker ones that I mentioned earlier, so again, viewer discretion. On November 12th of 1991, a deer hunter in Warner, Oklahoma, it's always deer hunters who come across these like incredibly brutal bodies.
From what I heard someone say something to me once. They were like, "Oh, I don't know why people are so scared of the woods. The woods isn't where killers go out to kill people. It's where they go to dump the bodies." And seeing this video, that kind of makes a lot.
I mean,
more
I guess
sense.
I don't know who else would come across him in the middle of the woods, but whatever. When coming over a hill, he saw a woman and man parked by the side of the road out in the woods. The hunter heard the woman scream before he saw the man begin to hit something, to which they both then got back in their car and drove away. Upon walking up to the area that they were at, he found a trash bag, which inside of it was a newborn baby. And the
Whoa.
screams that he was hearing was the mother giving birth. This remained a totally cold case until 18 years later in 2009 when the mother was identified through DNA testing. Penny Lori was arrested for being an accomplice in the murder of her own child. She never gave any information regarding the man who was with her who actually killed the child. What we do know is that the man who killed the child was not the baby's father, as the deer hunter was close enough to identify both of them as white, and the child themselves was interracial.
Oh no. Oh god, dude. Oh. Oh god, that's so annoying, man. Jesus Christ.
So while you could consider this kind of half solved, as we know who one of the participating party was, the motive and actual killer is simply left to the imagination, at least for now. Little Miss Penasivkey, as she's nicknamed, was found on February 19th of 1971. She was found submerged in Lake Penasivkey in Florida. Not only that, but she was found with a belt around her neck, and it was estimated by the coroner that she had been dead for 30 days. And one of the most amazing things to this is all of the stuff that can be determined to someone post-mortem, except for their identity. Like, the coroner was able to tell that while she was young that she had dental work done, she had ankle surgery a little bit older than that, and the specific town in Greece she originates due to the pollen concentration on her clothing, as well as a full reconstruction of her face. It kind of highlights the absurdity of whenever bodies are found, how sometimes we can know absolutely everything about them except who they are and who they knew. But other than that, that's all of the details that we know about this person. They were found obviously murdered, considering the belt around the neck, and whoever did it while doing a sloppy job of getting away with it, seems that they got away with it. The Kolb skeleton was so weird to read about. So in 1976, a man named Emery Kolb had a skeleton found in his house. I don't know if it's just because there's not a lot of information on it or what, but I cannot find the details of the manner in which the skeleton was found. But remember the hides that I mentioned earlier? The couple that went water rafting down the Colorado River and were never seen again? Well, Emery Kolb was the last person to see them and took a picture of them before they headed out. Well, one of the leading theories is that him and Bessie ran away together and killed her husband to do it. So whenever a skeleton was found in his house, people had questions, but apparently it's the skeleton of someone who committed suicide in the Grand Canyon in like a similar area a few decades back. So they never charged him with a crime. But like, why did he have that?
Yeah, why?
Like,
that's kind of weird.
Did they test it, or is that what he told them? It adds a layer of mystery to the Hyde story. And it's kind of odd to think that if there's all these theories about it and he just has a skeleton in his house, maybe that's worth looking into. The Bear Brook remains were discovered on November 10th of 1985 in Allenstown, New Hampshire, while you guessed it, deer hunter was out hunting. He came across a 55-gallon drum that was tipped over in the middle of the woods. Upon walking up to the drum, he discovered the body of a grown woman and a young girl wrapped in plastic. The police did a full investigation, locked down the crime scene, and weren't able to get anything. The case ended as quickly as it started, as there was absolutely no information to work on. 15 years later, now being a cold case, the state turned it over to the FBI. While the FBI was making their preliminary look around the crime scene, they came across a second 55-gallon drum. Inside of this were the bodies of 2 young girls. Now here's where it gets really weird. So DNA testing was used on all of the girls, and one of them tested as the daughter for the serial killer Robert Evans. So you initially think, oh, this is more of Robert Evans' victims, but after being caught, Robert Evans was very open about all the people he killed. He was the type who liked to bask in it, talk about the details, but he never mentioned his family. So it doesn't make sense that he would have committed these killings and not said anything about it. Not only that, but the other 3 girls had no relation to Robert. So this had led many to theorize, did another serial killer kill the daughter of another serial killer? Perhaps it was just sheer chance that led it to happen, or was this a purposeful act? No one knows, and we'll probably never know, as Robert died in prison in 2010. But many speculate that this was in fact a killer killing the family of another killer. And then finally we have Tristan Brutag. On March 26th of 1998, 13-year-old Tristan was on his way back from school in Frankfurt, Germany. He passed through a park which he frequented, and the last person he ever spoke to was at 3:20 when he told a woman that he liked her dog. Less than 2 hours later, at 5:08, the police received a call of a body found in the park. See, the park itself was very crowded, but underneath one of the bridges was a sort of concrete place that the kids would use as a skate area. When the police got there, there was a crowd underneath the bridge gathered around Tristan, to which Tristan himself had been cut, stabbed, bled from his neck, castrated and had various pieces of his skin removed, which were never found again. The initial girl who found the body
Whoa.
said that she saw hands reaching through from the other side of the sewer grate, grabbing Tristan and cutting him up, to which whenever she screamed, he scampered back into the sewer, which would mean that whoever it was had to come out of the sewer, grab Tristan from behind the bars, and pull him in to kill him. A day after Tristan's burial, Tristan's dad received a phone call from someone saying that they killed Tristan, and they continued to breathe heavy over the phone before they hung up. And on top of that, there was a report of grave digging at Tristan's plot. And to make all of it even weirder, a year later, 25 kilometers outside of Frankfurt, Germany, Tristan's backpack was found, which was missing at the original crime scene, which would have to mean that the killer stole it at the crime scene and then for some reason placed it outside the city. Also, the pieces of missing flesh imply cannibalism, so it seems like a sewer person stabbed a boy to death
cannibal
on a crowded day in a park before eating pieces of him, scampering back into the darkness, and never being caught. Oh boy. And that is it for the unexplained true crime iceberg. I talk about this a lot, but it's easy to get kind of wrapped up with how horrible some of this stuff can be. And I want to stress to you once again that just because this stuff is awful doesn't mean that the world itself is awful. And to see amazing effects that people can do every day, you just have to look around you, because you came to a video to hear about how bad it gets, and I enjoy it and it's fun, and I hope that you guys had as much fun listening to it as I did explaining it to you.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun.
But it's really easy to get bogged down with how bad things can be sometimes. So I encourage you to look around you and not let it get you down, because yeah, the world can be a pretty bad place, but it can be a pretty great place too. And a lot of that greatness is things like you all clicking on this video, taking time out of your day to hear me explain this, which really does mean the most. I'm just a
There's an
guy
update to one of the
who likes
killers.
weird stuff, and I'm so thankful that people.
The boy in the
have
box was
enjoyed watching as
identified
much as
too?
they have.
Whoa.
I want to say thank you all for watching. It really does mean the most. I think we're up to like 230,000
Joseph
subscribers
Augustus
now,
Sorelli.
which is hard for me to even comprehend. And it's all thanks to you guys. So thank you all so much for watching. As I mentioned earlier, I am sick with something. I've had like a cough and my throat hurts. I hope that I sounded bearable. It didn't sound too awful. I am on a lot of Dayquil and right now. But I hope that you enjoyed regardless. I hope it
I
wasn't
want to
too
look up this kid,
raspy
see
for
if
you.
there's anything else found out
Thank
about
you
him.
all for watching. Thank you so much to my subscribers. Thank you to my patrons. I say this all the time. I can't say this enough, but thank you guys for not only supporting me with your time and effort, but the fact that you support me monetarily is hard to even wrap my head around. But thank you guys so much. I couldn't do it without you. Thank you to my top tier patrons, as you see here. I love all of you so much. It really does mean the most. So thank you guys so much for being a part of this. Thank you for watching. Thank you for sticking around.
Even though he was identified, the circumstances leading to his death are uncertain, and the case is still considered an open homicide investigation.
New videos will be up end of this week, start of next. Thank you all for sticking with me. I know the upload schedule is sporadic, but is what it is. But I appreciate it. Thank you all so much for watching. Thank you for sticking around. New projects coming up soon, but if you don't care about any of that, just thank you for being here. I hope you have a blessed day, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!
Ah, Jesus Christ, dude. Why was that one so loud? What the fuck? All right, good video. Thanks, Wendigoon. I was just looking more into the kid's story, and then he just yells at me. Goodbye. All right, bye.